This is going to be a comprehensive list of advice if I were to start a brand new account today, what I would do, what I would farm, how I would determine which characters I need and which characters I should just go for if I already have, where to invest your resources in, what to farm, and then at the end I will also be going through the shop to discuss if you are a whale, what is worthwhile to buy. First and foremost, as a place of reference, I am Equilibrium 6, Trailblaze level 70. I am max leveled out. I do buy out the shop consistently. I have bought all of the packs here, and I've even bought some of these before. For the characters I have, it is Fushuan E1, E4 Jingliu, E6 Silverwolf, E2 Sealy, E2 Mbabadu Lunai, and so on. I do have all of their respective signatures as well. Save for Kafka. For resources, I have 5.6 million credits, 300 purple experience books, and 300 Aether for light cones. First and foremost, let's just talk about generalized farming, what you should realistically be focusing your efforts on. For most of you, in World 7 of Simulated Universe, it's going to be where you're spending the vast majority of your time. Most of your resources will be spent getting relics from here. The supportive set Broken Heal is great for anybody. Realistically speaking, effect resistance is not a bad stat. Unlike something like Genshin Impact, your supports won't be dealing drastic amounts of damage that can shape the entire tide of battle. This isn't going to be a situation where your healer is dealing Bennett levels of damage. Instead, your healers are just there to heal. They're just there to keep you alive. Don't focus on building them out with DPS stats like crit rate and crit damage. Instead, effect resistance is a legitimately good stat to have. It determines your likelihood of resisting a debuff, whilst also determining your likelihood of resisting stuff like Frozen, Imprisonment, and so on. So always farm out this 2-piece set, and the crit damage bonus is nice. If you're looking at this in comparison to something like a new set or anything else later on, for example, World 3 has Space Sealing Station and Fleet of the Ageless. Space Sealing Station gives you attack, and yes, it is a decent stat to have, don't get me wrong, but in terms of priority, attack percent is the lowest out of the three. The big three are attack percent, then damage bonus, and at the top it's going to be crit rate and crit damage, as these are stats you can essentially build your entire roster around getting, and you can get external attack buffs later on. Next up, Rudolent Arena here is also extremely useful for the vast majority of characters. Most of your DPSs will use their skills to a large degree, to the extent to where this, in comparison to something like an ultimate damage bonus or even a follow-up damage bonus, is going to have much more value for your accounts. I understand people may use characters like Jing Yuan or Clara who utilize follow-up attacks, technically speaking, but it is not worthwhile to strictly farm out those sets when most other characters will utilize something similar to this one. In terms of pure relics, I have a lot of them, as you can see here, but there are essentially two valuable sets that I would prioritize farming for new players especially. Regardless as to who you go for, whether you're going for Sealy, whether you're going for Jingliu, whether you're going for any other unit in the future, essentially you're limited down to two primary sets that have the most versatility. First and foremost, you have things like the speed set. As you see here, Messenger and Longevous, these are in the same domain. Both of these are great. Longevous is good for any HP scaling character like Blade and any healer especially. Whereas the HP or the speed set that's also paired with it is good for anybody. You can throw this onto a Jingliu, you can throw this onto a Bronya, you can throw this onto legitimately any character who wants that bonus speed, because every character can benefit from bonus speed. It's a great supportive set. Something to keep in mind though, whilst building out these characters, is that it's perfectly fine to have a 2-piece speed set and mix it with something like a 2-piece guard set for more survivability. The 2-piece speed set gives you that 12% speed bonus, but that is based entirely around your base speed, not your total speed. So hypothetically speaking, even though you could have more speed on one character, the stat that determines who gets a bigger bonus would be the base speed of 100 that my Fushuan has over the 129 speed, because Bronya only has 99 speed here. It's a slight thing just to keep in mind if you want to speed tune your characters. But that's a more advanced stat and a more advanced methodology I want to go over later. Essentially, if you are farming out, either farm out Longevous Disciple in the speed set, or focus down on Musketeers with the healing set. Both of those are very versatile. Musketeers can go on pretty much any support you want, whether it's a Yukong, whether it is your characters like Denheng who use basic attacks quite a lot. It's versatile. Both of them are really good. I would prioritize the speed set first and foremost though. Hypothetically, let's say looking at building up a character and you want to know when to farm out these Ascension materials. You always want to wait until you are at a higher equilibrium level. If you're at equilibrium 1, wait until you're at 2. Because you do get 2 drops. The drops increase as you go up to a maximum of 5 to 6. But keeping this in mind, it's really just 5 here at equilibrium of 6. But keeping that in mind, if you are on the verge to, let's say hypothetically, you're going to cross over to Trailblaze level 30 tomorrow, it is better to save up your stamina until you cross over that threshold, because even if it only saves you 1 to 2 runs, that is additional stamina that can otherwise be spent on EXP, on relics, or whatever the case may be, on anything that you need in that moment. So it's always good to wait a little while. In regards to character buildings, what should you focus on first? Traces or light cones? Both cost the exact same material, so how should you go about building out characters? Well, it honestly depends. Some units, like Fu Xuan for example, care a lot about their light cone because the light cone gives you base stats, 1200 HP. That's a good base stat to have. Whereas the traces, all these are good, don't get me wrong, but unless they are directly increasing the character's survivability, if your characters die, they can't help you out. So I will always prioritize the base stats that light cone provides, then the traces first. But you always can admit that it's going to be a little bit easier just to get this to maxed out and not have to worry about it. Alternatively, you can slide these around. If you aren't using Fu Xuan, you can slide this over to any other character who needs it. An example is my Fu Xuan, as of right now with her maxed out light cone, has 9.3k HP and 1300 defense. If I give her a level 1 light cone that gives her no bonus stats, she's lost 4000 HP and 500 defense. So she's much squishier. Even though they don't look like they give you a lot, the base stats on these light cones is what all your relics will scale to. So even though these give you minor bonuses here and there, it's much better to build up the light cone first and then focus primarily on the main purpose of your character's kit. I maxed out the characters I like. As you see here, I've maxed out my Fu Xuan, I've maxed out my Silver Wolf, I've maxed out my Yanqing. I'll max out the units who I adore and think are cute. That's why my Lynx is maxed, despite her never needing this max basic attack. Don't do this. If you are early game, sure, when you're later on you can, but if you are early on, it is important to prioritize the abilities that your characters are primarily meant to utilize. The healing this gives on her ultimate, it scales with the talent, it scales with everything else. Her basic attack and her ults can be left at level 1 if you don't really care about it. Instead, her skill gives you a decent bonus, especially the crit rate and the max HP. And her talent is what gives you additional HP and a less damage bonus overall. Both of these are where you should be spending your resources on. These are just nice to-haves. So, when should you start farming out relics? Well, gonna be honest with you, they're kind of the last thing you should focus on. Relics do dictate a vast majority of your damage. You can have a great build, you can have a pretty average build here. But what really is the determining factor is your relics will cost you the most stamina per run, and you are the least likely to get an upgrade from them. 40 stamina for a chance at 2 to 3 gold relics at the later equilibrium levels isn't necessarily a good trade-off when traces deal more and help you out more, when light cone additional levels help you out more, when character levels help you out more. I would prioritize your traces first, your light cone second, and then if you aren't guaranteed that your first or second gold drop from relic farming, just stockpile trace mats. Those legitimately aren't going to ever not be useful. So stockpile those, stockpile credit, stockpile XP before you ever dip into relic farming. Full prioritization. When should you go for characters? When are light cones worth it, if ever? And should you ever be pulling for eidolons? Well, first and foremost, certain characters, like Fu Xuan here, have the benefit of being preservation. If a character is a supportive unit, they are going to be the make or break for your team. Yes, DPSs are great. They're incredibly strong, but objectively speaking, they are limited to how much damage they deal, and as such can be replaced if you get another DPS that is stronger. Supports, however, are extremely viable and versatile. You can slide them onto pretty much any team, and the vast majority of the time they will perform well. And so as a result, units who can perform multiple roles or can keep you alive have much higher value than units whose sole job is to deal more damage. With that being said, let's go over each of these individual units who I have on my account right now, and let's talk about why some are more valuable than others. Yanqing and Jingliu both are incredibly easy to build because they give you so many stats: crit rate, crit damage, and attack. The difference is, Jingliu kills her team, so you do need a healer or some form of preservation, whereas Yanqing doesn't want to be hit, so you do need some form of protection. Both of these have their respective trade-offs, but would I recommend them? The answer is yes. Both of them give enough stats to where early game they perform really well because they are going to likely be your best build characters at that moment. Next up, we have the tanky units like Blade. Blade, contrary to Jingliu, has a good set that gives him a bunch of stats, but subsequently his main value lies in his tankiness because he's HP scaling. This is nice to have. He doesn't deal as much damage as Jingliu, but the trade-off for that is he arguably has some of the highest tankiness levels overall in comparison to other units in this game. So your priority should always be Survivability first, whether that is building up the 4-star who can heal you and having 2 separate decent healers, whether that's Natasha and Lynx, whether that's Bailu and someone like Fushuan, or Bailu and Lynx, doesn't matter. Your preservation and your ability to survive is most important. At least 2 of these characters need to exist on your account separately. Then will be your supports. This could be your debuffers or your buffers. If you have a Bronya, she is basically your top priority to build in terms of supports. If you have a Fushuan, the same thing goes for her. If you have a Bailu or any form of healer, that's what goes for them. Your debuffers and your buffers are great units. And your DPS, even though they're technically speaking the strongest unit in your team comp, is your lowest priority to get up and going. Yes, your DPS will clear content, but your supports are what determine how much and how far you can go. You can only level up your essential DPS to a certain extent. You can get up the traces, you can get up the relics, you can max out the light cone, but the vast majority of the time, if you don't have a good support, you're going to have issues. If you can't survive, you're going to have issues. So even though your DPS is incredibly important, your supports have the ability to be swapped around over to your other characters to help them. So I would say it's better to invest more heavily into them and their traces and talents than investing more heavily into DPSs who may be benched the moment a stronger unit comes out. For light cones, when are they ever worthwhile? Well, let's talk about stats. There are 3 things to consider when buying or looking into pulling for a light cone. First and foremost, how flexible is it? This can be if a light cone gives HP and none of the characters you need have or scale with HP, it's probably not a flexible light cone. An example like this is Luocha's attack light cone for healers. Healers mostly want HP, or at least outgoing healing bonus. So first off, it is the flexibility of the light cone that can be determined by the base stat it gives you. Second, it can be prerequisite requirements. Examples include Bronya's light cone. The vast majority of the time, you won't be able to determine who's going next unless you are using Bronya specifically. So in this instance, Bronya's light cone, whilst having decent stats, doesn't necessarily have flexibility because the prerequisite requirements for activating the buff, same with something like Seely's light cone, aren't that inherently low. And finally, its stats. The vast majority of the time, you're looking for crit rate or crit damage, attack percentage, and then damage bonus. This one has crit damage, and then damage bonus, defense ignore. The stats that it gives you are great, but the problem with this one is prerequisites. You won't be killing your team a lot, so as a result, this light cone won't have that much value on the characters. Dan Hang's light cone gives you crit rate, it gives you basic attack damage and attack percentage here, and energy regen rate. So in this instance, the crit rate is nice, the attack and the energy regen are nice, but the vast majority of your characters who are in the destruction path may not be using basic attacks enough to get these stacks to get this bonus. And so only pull a light cone if you can see it being used on multiple characters on your account currently, not necessarily with the intent on getting them for future characters because you may not know if they will be as useful. The Chain Mains and Pridwin do offer some insight into these, but for the vast majority of the time, only pull if either A, you love the character, or B, you feel like you can legitimately use it on a bunch of different units. But the lower priorities, it's going to be your preservation and your healers. Your debuffers don't necessarily need their light cones. I'd say Bronya's once again has the best value, but outside of that, other units don't really gain much from their respective light cones. It's mostly your DPSs who get the most value from it. Finally, let's hit up the store. These aren't necessarily worthwhile buying. Yes, this is good for a rainy day, but considering unlike Genshin, we don't have regions, you can just farm these up when you have no idea what else to do with your time. For pouches, yeah, honestly, for the first mindset, if you're just buying out the bonuses, all of these are worth getting before the final pack. You want to prioritize each of these lower ones, then the final one last, because you get the same amount of value for slightly less. For light cones here in the Starlight Exchange, Bronya's your first priority. Then technically speaking, everything else is up to you. It's personal choice. Bronya is good if you have Bronya. Everything else is just nice to have. If you love a character, get their light cone. Just be aware that some light cones, for example like Sleep Like the Dead, won't exactly be better than other alternative options, so it's only good to get these if you just want that character to have their respective signature. And that's going to do it for me. Tell me what you like, tell me what your plans are, tell me if you've been enjoying Aegis, or if you're an older player maybe hopping back in, tell me your thoughts. But in general, I do legitimately want to know and hope if you're getting into this game for the first time or coming back, you have a good time. And if you are taking a break, who will you be coming back for? Either way, my name's been Kabuki. Consider subscribing, and I'll see you next time.